So welcome back to another Flash video tutorial for class, and I'm going to re-examine the bouncing ball and how to do that, and also incorporated into this is how to import bitmap files and use them in Flash. So I will create a new ActionScript file, new ActionScript 3 file. So we get our standard stage setup. I'm going to hit Control 2, which is my keyboard shortcut for sizing the screen to my window. And I'm going to come to File, Import, Import to Stage, or Import to Library would be fine in this instance also. There it is. That's gorgeousness. So I've got a PNG file of my head, which I'm going to open. Oh, Shazam. Okay. So I brought in a bitmap file, and it shows up here in my library. It gets this little green icon, and if I scroll over, it gives me type bitmap. So one of the things that, and I'm not sure why this isn't the default in Flash, but one of the things, if I double click on my file here in the library, I get my bitmap properties. Another way to get there is to right click and go to properties. There's this little feature right here that I don't know why is not a default, but you should always click that as soon as you bring a bitmap into your folder, and it just gets rid of some of the jaggedness. I don't know if you can tell if you look here, it updates automatically. There's these very jagged outlines, and if I click Allow Smoothing, it smooths it out and makes it look much nicer. So I'm going to click OK, and so I have here a bitmap image of this my gorgeous head in this file. I can do a couple things with this. I can break it the same way we do with text or groups or symbols. I can break apart, and it actually breaks it into kind of a shape where you get the dotted lines, and I can manipulate the outside boundaries of that shape. It's generally not a good idea to do this. The only reason you would, I think, oh, look at that, is if you were using this as just a reference and you didn't need the whole image. But normally you really want to keep these together as bitmaps, otherwise Flash can get more temperamental than normal. So I'm going to hit F8 and I'm going to convert this to a symbol called myhead01, and movie clip is fine for our purposes right now. And so myhead01 will be our bouncing ball. So I will scale this down to a size that's better for the screen. I'm holding Shift to constrain my proportions. So that's about fine. And this could stand a little, I know it's hard to believe, but it could stand a little touching up. So how about my properties menu here? I come down to my filters, and I'm just going to go into my adjust color and just kind of maybe brighten up and adjust the contrast a little bit. This is definitely not Photoshop, so if you wanted to fix this file, you could do so in Photoshop. Okay, so here on my main stage is my instance of movie clip, myhead01. Inside of myhead01, if I double click, we see we go inside, and here is my awesome face. Bitmap, we've added a color adjustment here to just kind of make it a little more visible. We would need to go back into Photoshop if we really wanted to do any serious retouching. But here's my head on the stage, and my head is going to be my bouncing ball. So, and then we'll also cover here again that embedded animation. So the first thing I'm going to do is create my bouncing ball. So here is going to be my first pose, starting here at the top of the bounce. And so I will select my frame here on the timeline. Hit F5 to expand my timeline, which at this point has not added a second keyframe. So I will select my last keyframe, or my last frame, I'm sorry, and add a keyframe. So I want my head to bounce, to go down, and then bounce back up. So right here, around here in the middle, I'm going to create another keyframe hitting F6. Select my noggin and shift drag down to where my ground plane would be. So we'll say right about here, and I'm holding shift just to kind of constrain my in a straight line, so I don't get it off by too much. So my head starts at the top, hits the bottom, and bounces back up to the top. So the process we're all kind of familiar with at this point. I'm going to right click, I'm going to select my layer title over here, which allows me to select all the frames on my layer. Right click and create classic tween, which creates a classic tween on my entire layer. If I didn't want to do that, if I wanted to only create a classic tween on the first part, then I would just select that span, any one frame within the span of these two keyframes, right click, create classic tween, and that will create the classic tween just in that area. If for whatever reason I didn't want a classic or motion tween or anything here, I could do that. But in this case, it's fine to create classic tween throughout the whole timeline here. So here is the movement of my head. Kind of a little bit of a Pong thing going on here, which is fine for now. But obviously, how we've covered in class as far as our timing, we're going to use our eases, and so here we want to ease into the action. So we want our drawings, or my each frame, the drawing in each frame, to be closer together here at the top, further apart here at the bottom to simulate accelerating, and that conversion of that energy back up and then slowing into this frame, or easing out of the action. So I will select my classic tween span on any frame here in between these two keyframes, which gives me my tweening label in the properties, and I will just drag my value to -100, which gives me an ease in. So as you can see, my drawings are closer together at the top of my stage, and then accelerates to the bottom, hits the bottom, and so here I need to scrub to give it an ease out. So now if I render my movie, you get this nice little fairly believable bouncing effect of my awesome head. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is select my layer. So I'm going to select it here on the left side of my timeline by the layer name, which will select my entire layer. And what I'm going to do is right click on the layer and come to copy layers. Then I'm going to come to my library, create a new symbol, and I'll call head animation 1 and click OK. So I'm inside my head animation 01 symbol. This is the head animation 01 timeline. I will right click on my layer 1 here on the left of my timeline and click paste layers, which pastes my new layer. This layer I don't have anything on, so I'm just going to trash it and get rid of it. So here's that animation inside the head head animation 01 symbol. So I'm going to come back out onto my main stage, create a new layer, delete my old layer, because I've embedded my animation now. I don't need it on the main timeline. I've embedded it into this symbol here. So I will drag that symbol from the library onto my stage. However, if I scrub or play through my timeline here, I don't see the animation updating because currently this is considered to be a movie clip. So if I wanted to be able to see what was going on inside, I could convert this here to a graphic. And now I will get a live update on my timeline. So I'm not sure why it is like this, but for some reason my looping is defaulting to starting at frame 21. So I'm going to start my looping at frame 1. So I'll stop at the top, at the top of my arc. So here I can play through my timeline if I want to loop it, and then select marker range all, so it'll loop the entire timeline. Here I can see my animation on my stage, which didn't loop at all, apparently. Wow, that's really useless. Okay, so I'm going to hit enter, or control enter, create my Swift file, and here is my bouncing head inside of my graphic symbol. So similar to, and actually that's kind of slow, so I'm going to come inside of my symbol, and I'm just going to speed up my animation here a little bit. Again, selecting not the frames, make sure I don't have frames here selected, although I only have one layer, so it kind of doesn't matter. But if I select up here on the frame numbers, I don't have any specific layer selected, and it will I will hit Shift F5 to decrease the length of my timeline. So if I let's see, my length here is 33 frames, so I want my outer timeline to match that, and it tells me right here 33 frames. So I will select the rest of my timeline, hit Shift F5 to remove those frames. I actually went one too far, so I'm going to hit F5 to go back to 33, and this should play, so that's a little nicer, a little quicker. So I'm going to then kind of extend my timeline out even further, and since this is set to loop, it will continue to loop. But I am getting that problem that we saw before. It's barely noticeable. However, my first and last frame here are going to be repeating in the loop. So one way to fix that is with motion tweens. Shape tweens, this is a little trickier, but with motion tweens, or classic tweens, all I really need to do is select this previous keyframe, frame right before the last keyframe, hit F6 to create a new keyframe, select my last keyframe, and hit Shift F5 to remove that frame entirely. And now this frame is, the position in this frame is one frame before the final position, so now it will loop seamlessly. So now I can start my head here off screen, and then on my last frame create a new keyframe, and I'm just shift dragging my head over to the other side of the stage. And then I will create my classic tween, and so the head is bouncing up and down inside of my symbol, and the outside of my symbol is traveling across the stage. Hooray for me. So that's, again, embedding an animation and inside of another animation, and importing a bitmap, converting it to a symbol in your library. These are kind of fun, so I might be doing a few more here for you. Enjoy.